Today's webcast is going to deal with the new version of the AnyBody modeling system and the musculoskeletal modeling repository. So this is the AnyBody version 7.1 as we call it. And our speaker for today is Morten Lund, who is a R&D engineer at AnyBody Technology. Myself, I'm Anant, and I work at AnyBody Technology as well. So to give you a quick outline of the proceedings we've lined up for today, we'll start with a general introduction to the AnyBody modeling system, and this will be delivered by me, after which I'll switch the word over to Morten, who will tell us more about the new features in version 7.1 of the AnyBody modeling system. He'll take us through the new help resources and support documentation that are available, and also the new model repository, AMMR 2.0 as we call it, specifically a new musculoskeletal model that we've of the lower limb, which we call the T-limb 2.0 model, which comes along with this release. And we will round this all up with some questions and answers at the very end. So the class of simulations that are run using the AnyBody modeling system, they're called musculoskeletal simulations. And for those of you who aren't very familiar with this, these simulations, they essentially take in inputs in the form of motion data, and this consists of motion kinematics as well as external forces acting on the body during the motion. And the outputs that they give are typically the instantaneous values of the internal body loads, and these could include joint moments, muscle forces, and joint reaction forces. So as for the applications of this technology, they can be quite wide-ranging. They go from product design optimization to ergonomic analysis, planning surgery and evaluating the outcome of a surgical intervention. It could be to generate load cases for finite element analyses. And this is, for example, if you're trying to design a new implant and you want to estimate the loads that are going to be applied on this implant once you've put it inside a human or a human subject. So you can actually generate the forces, you can simulate the forces in AnyBody and then pass these on to finite element software. And last but not the least, you have motion analysis. This is just when you want to analyze free movement in different motion environments. You can do these in the AnyBody modeling system as well. So to quickly introduce you to the general workflow of a typical AnyBody simulation. Now, a simulation consists of three vital components. The first being the motion data, which I just spoke about in the previous slide. Then you have the human body model, which we also call a musculoskeletal model. And then you have a model of the environment in which the motion is occurring. And in this case, this has been taken to be an exoskeleton. So you fuse all of these together into a single man-machine model and then run an inverse dynamic simulation, which gives you the required results. So for some reason, I guess my video isn't working. That's fine. So these internal body loads, that is the muscle forces and the joint reaction forces, may be the final output that you're looking for. In other cases, you may want to pass this information on to other post-processing tools, such as finite element software. And particularly, we do have ready-made interfaces when you want to pass your forces on to Abacus or ANSYS finite element solvers. In other cases, you may want to actually optimize the design of your environment so that it induces some favorable biomechanical behavior in the human body, such as, for example, reducing muscle forces in the thigh in the case of an exoskeleton. And these design optimization studies can be run within AnyBody too. So on that note, I think I've given you a quick introduction of how the software works, and I would like to give the word over to Morten, who will tell us more about this version 7.1.
Thanks, Anand, for the nice introduction. I hope everyone can hear me. So I'll talk about the new features now. So basically, the AnyBody modeling system is two different things when you download it. First and foremost, it's of course the modeling system itself. This is what you see here on the left side of the screen. But it's also the model repository, which is a folder on your computer with a lot of models in them. And these models are open, scripted models, so you can open up all the model files and see and inspect the models and change them as you like. And the model repository consists of course, the body models, the models of the different body parts, but also a number of examples that you can use as starting points for your own modeling system. So we have new versions of both of these things. The modeling system is updated to version 7.1, and the model repository is version 2.0 for this release. I'm first going to talk a little bit about the new features in the AnyBody modeling system. But how do you get the new version if you need to update? Well, first of all, you can go to our website, anybodytech.com, and you can click the downloads button. And from there, you can click customer downloads. And this will take you to the download site where you can download the newest version of the modeling system. So there is a download button, and if you're outside of Europe, there's a download mirror, which should be faster. Well, let's talk about what's new in the modeling system. And to figure out everything that is new in the new modeling system, you can click the Help button in the menu bar. And this will open up the dialog, and you can select Release Notes from that. And this will give you a document describing all of the new things. In this webcast here, we're not going to talk about everything, but I'm going to talk about some of the most important things. But firstly, the new modeling system is updated from version 7.0 to 7.1. And what does that mean? That means basically that there is no major changes in the modeling system. But on the other hand, there are many smaller bug fixes and improvements. And there are many tweaks to the user interface. And there are updates to the muscle models and some updates to the system for collecting mechanical objects. The last 2 points here are actually not that important, but I'm mentioning them for a specific reason. The updates to the muscle models, they are basically some new variables that are added to this AnyMoCap class. But I'm mentioning them because they are basically preparation for future releases. They have no influence on your actual model. So if you load your model, or if you download the new modeling system and install it and load your older models, everything will work as it should. But you may get some warnings and notices about those renamed variable names. So, for example, now the AnyMoCap class always contains the volume, and there are some variables that have been renamed. But when you get these warnings, it's really not a problem. There's also a lot of tweaks and updates to the user interface. When we released version 7 of the AnyBody modeling system, we introduced a whole new interface to the modeling system. And there were maybe some things which didn't work quite as we wanted to in the beginning. So we've updated some of these things. For example, we've improved the logic of these editor tabs, so they now work in a more logical way. We added some faster graphics in the model view. So if your computer has an external graphics card, it will be used automatically, and that speeds up everything quite a lot if you are on a laptop that has 2 graphics cards. There's also a new status bar here at the bottom, which will show whatever the modeling system is doing. There is a new convenience button. So if you browse the model tree and you find a variable of interest, if that variable is part of one of those simulation studies, there will be a small button for directly plotting that variable, so that you don't have to open a chart view and dig into the same variable. There's also some updates to how these dockable windows work. So in the first release that we have with this interface, version 7, you could basically select some of those windows and then drag them loose. That had the unfortunate effect that we often undock these windows by accident. So you can no longer drag those windows out. So instead, if you need to move the windows around, you'll just double click one of the windows, and that will undock it, and then you can move the window to somewhere else. Otherwise, you could right click it and select undock. And then finally, we have some updates to the editor itself. It now handles bigger files without a problem, and it highlights matching braces. So if the cursor is next to a brace, it will highlight the matching brace. And for people who are doing a lot of development and writing AnyScript code, this makes life a little bit easier. Finally, we have some new help resources in the modeling system. There's an updated AnyBody tutorial. I'm gonna show that in a few seconds. And there is some updates or a new model repository documentation that you can also open. Also, if you browse the AnyScript code, you might sometimes come across commented code that looks something like this, where it says something about HTML doc. If you see lines like that in the script, you can double click that and it will take you directly to the documentation that is relevant for the section you're looking at. Yeah. Now I think I'll just show you these two new help resources. So let's open up the AnyBody modeling system. We have it here. So if I select help from the menu and press tutorials, this launches a browser with the AnyBody tutorials. So the AnyBody tutorials have been reworked. The tutorials are great resource when you're starting up using the AnyBody modeling system, or if you want to do anything specific, you can usually find a tutorial that will help you and match your needs. We have tutorials from getting started with the simple things to more advanced things like fine element analysis, personalizing your models, scaling, and these kind of things. So for every tutorial, there will be a number of lessons that you can go through to learn something. Besides the tutorials, there is also like a new documentation for the model repository. It looks somewhat similar to the tutorials. Let me launch it. But these help resources here are directly targeted the actual model repository and the models that are in there. I'll get back to this when we go through what's new in the model repository. So let's return to the presentation. And now we can talk about what's new in the model repository itself. The model repository is updated from version 1.6 to 2.0. And we do this versioning here to indicate that this is a major release. There are many, many improvements and changes to the model repository. I'm going to talk about a few of them in just a minute. And what we're going to talk about today is a new lower extremity model that is included in the model repository. We're going to talk about the new mandible model and a new framework for doing MoCap-based models. And there is also some new and updated examples in the model repository. But there are many more things than this. And to get the complete list in the AMMR documentation, you can find a changelog. So opening up the AMMR documentation and finding the section called About AMMR and then changelog, you can find a complete list of changes. So I'm just going to show you that. So here we have opened the documentation. I'll select About and changelog, and here we can see the complete list of changes. So the first part of this document is all the major changes to the AMMR, and then there is a list of minor fixes and changes, and at the bottom here we have a lot of fixes and stuff that has been removed. So if you have any specific needs or just interested, I encourage you to read through this. This will give you a complete overview of what has changed. So let's start to talk about how you get this new model repository if you downloaded and installed the AnyBody modeling system. So the repository is not installed by default. So if you install the AnyBody modeling system for all users, the different users will have to install their own repository, their own version of the repository. And to do this, you will open up the help menu and select the demo entry here. This will bring you to the demo tab of the AnyBody assistant. Well, let's see if we can do that and follow what I just said. So we will select help and demo. And this will open up the AnyBody assistant on the demo tab. And we can see here that there's nothing really here except a single link that says install demo repository. So I will click this and select yes. It will ask me where I want to unpack it. Per default, it's in your documents folder. So let's do that. And then it will copy in all the new files. And while it's copying here, I will go and see if I can find it on my disk. So we'll go to Documents and AnyBody 7.1. And here we have the folder. Not all the files are still there. They're unpacking. But when you start to work with this, I recommend that you start by renaming this folder or making a copy of it, so that when you next time want to install a fresh copy, you don't accidentally overwrite your work. So that's a good practice. So now it's finished copying over the stuff. So let us just rename this to my version or something like that. Inside this folder here, you can see a few other folders. There is an application folder that contains different examples, which are good as starting points. If you go into the examples folder, there's a lot of different applications that you can use for starting point. You can also go back, and there is a folder called MoCap examples. This has some example models for MoCap based analysis. We'll get back to that in a little bit later. There's a folder for validation examples. In the top level folder, there's also a folder called body that contains all the body models that we work with. And then there is a folder called documentation, and that contains the actual AMR documentation as HTML files. So let's close this again and return to the presentation. So with the AMR installed, we can talk about what's new in it. And one of the things that are new is a new lower extremity model that has been added. This is based on a data set which was produced in the TLM Safe EU project. And the data set is called the 20 lower extremity model. And it was published in this paper that you see here in Journal of Biomechanics, TLM 2.0, a comprehensive musculoskeletal geometry data set for subject-specific modeling of the lower extremity. So this is a really comprehensive data set for doing musculoskeletal modeling. And the first implementation of this data set was done also by the two authors of this paper, Vincenzo Carbone and René Floyd from the University of Twente. This was done a few years ago, and the model was used in the TLM project. What we are releasing here today is an updated version of this model. We call it TLM 2.1. And we update the version number here to indicate that we have changed stuff compared to the original implementation. All the wrapping surfaces in this model has been re-engineered. So we have recreated the wrapping surfaces from the original MRI scans of the cadaver. So we believe that creates much better wrapping surfaces in the model. We've also redefined all the joint axes. Now they are fitted directly from the bone geometry. And there are many other smaller bug fixes and improvements to the model. All of this work here was done in another EU project called the Lifelong Joints EU project by Enrico De Peri from ETH in Zurich. And he's also written a paper on all of this work. And this paper has just been submitted to PLOS ONE. So if you're interested in exactly what this work is about, you can contact the author. So the new TLM2 model is not default in the modeling system. If you create a new model, it will not use this model by default. But many of the examples, starting examples that I showed you before that you can find in the model repository, they use this new model. And it's also possible to easily define a setting which will activate this new lower extremity model. And there is more about how to do this in the AMR documentation. So let me just open that. So in the AMR documentation, there is a section called body models. And below that, you can find the 20 lower extremity model. And this is the page that I've opened here. It contains a description of the model, along with the updates that has been made. There is some documentation of on what parameters you need to enable in order to use the model. There's also some resources on previous webcasts from the TLM Safe project, and some useful references about papers that has some validation of this new model. Let's return to the presentation again. Another new model in the modeling system is a new mandible model. This mandible model is based on a CT scan of a 40-year-old male. The model was created by Michael Skipper Andersen and Mark Desay from Aalborg University in Denmark. And it was just recently published in Journal of Biomechanical Engineering, as you see here below. There's also a validation example of how to use the new mandible model in the repository. And the validation example is the exact same thing as was published in this paper, so you can rerun the model to get the same results. Then finally, a big thing in the new repository is a new framework for doing MoCap models. And this framework replaces all the old MoCap examples that were in the model repository. So you find all these new MoCap examples that are based on this framework by opening up the applications folder in the model repository and then choosing MoCap examples. And inside here, there will be different folders that are good starting points if you need to do MoCap modeling. The new framework, it provides a much easier setup when you want to do MoCap analysis. It supports both marker-based, this means C3D-based analysis, and analysis that are based on inertial motion capture input, for example, BVH files. And we recently had a webcast on this where the model was driven using data from an XSense inertial sensor chute. This webcast, I think, will be available on YouTube within a week or two. So I really encourage you to take a look at that. The whole framework provides many other features as well. It's much easier to do ground reaction force prediction if you don't have force plate data. It's easier to set up MoCap analyses with multiple trials and many subjects. I can say that in one of our projects we have thousands of trials and hundreds of subjects. And this setup here handles this really well. You can also handle marker dropouts very easily. And you can filter the markers individually with different cutoff frequencies if that's is important. This could be important, for example, if you're analyzing very fast movement, pitching, these kind of things where some markers move extremely fast. Those have to be filtered with a higher cutoff frequency. It also handles offset to force platforms. So if you, as we had in one of our experiments, have stairs strapped to your force platform, then it's easy to introduce these offsets to the force platforms. And there are many more things. And there is a documentation page for this AnyMoCap thing. So just open that so you can see where it is. So in the AMMR documentation, there is a section called the AnyMoCap framework. And this shows you, it will show or state some of the features. It will show the whole system for running these analyses, what it's based on. We'll get back to that in a second. It will also have an entry on the different examples that you can run, or examples that are included already. And it also has a link to the AnyBody tutorials, where there is a whole tutorial about using this new MoCap framework. So if we click this, there is a tutorial about actually using this whole framework for doing MoCap analysis. But if any of you have tried the previous MoCap models in AnyBody, this will be a big improvement. Let's go back to the presentation here. So we can talk a little bit about how the MoCap framework works. Usually you provide some muscular template geometry. This will be the body models in this case, and you come with your own dynamic motion capture trial data. And the first step in running these MoCap models is parameter identification. So when you have run the model, there will be an operation in the operations trees called run parameter identification. And what that does is that it will scale the model to match your marker input. This is what you see here on the video on the side. And besides scaling, it would also match or optimize some of the marker positions, so the markers fit your data. And after optimizing marker positions and segment length and anthropometry, the next step is to actually run the actual analysis on the scaled model. So that's the next part. And this is what's called run analysis, the run analysis operation in the operations tree. In principle, that's actually several steps. And the two important ones are the market tracking and the inverse dynamics. These two things are split into their separate components for making the whole thing run faster. But in principle, you really don't have to think about that. Market tracking will run the model without muscles and track the markers to produce joint angles. And then when you have those set of joint angles, you can run the inverse dynamic analysis, which will calculate muscle forces and so. But for all practical purposes, you can just choose the run analysis operation and it will run the whole thing through. And if you've already run the parameter identification, you don't have to run that again either. Finally, after this analysis is done, it saves the output. So the next time you load your results, you can just select the load and replay button, and it will load the previous results and replay those. And this brings us to the end of what the new features in the model repository. We still have many other things in the pipeline, which we are really eager to release. So you can look forward to the spring release that we are preparing. We have some stuff about graphical model editing, plugins for the modeling system where you could use graphical widgets to sort of configure your model and do other things. We also have a new thoracic model in the pipeline. Like this is a model where each of the different ribs are their individual segments with muscles in between. And we have something coming up with volume-based muscle recruitment, which we're really excited about showing. So there's plenty of things to look forward to. And then finally, I think I will give the word back to Anand.
Great. So I think all of you should be able to see my screen right now. I'll just have a final few words to wrap things up. So if you're interested in checking out our previous webcasts, we would encourage you to go to our YouTube channel. You can see that it's youtube.com/user/AnyBodyTech, or just search for AnyBody Technology and our channel should pop up. And a recording of this webcast as well will be uploaded there soon. And if you are a new user or you would like to learn more about the software, we do have some tutorial videos uploaded there too. We also would encourage you to visit our webpage, which is anybodytech.com for information on future events such as webcasts or conferences that we are attending, where you may want to meet us. And also, if you're interested in learning more about what can be achieved by using the AnyBody modeling system. So as this video over here shows, we do have a publication list where you can actually sort this publication list in accordance with the specific fields that you are interested in. And so this is a pretty cool way to get a quick overview of the literature in your specific area. And of course, you can apply multiple filters at the same time as this video shows. Great. I guess let's wrap things up on that note. Thank you all for attending. If some of you are new to AnyBody and you would actually like to try out this new version for yourself, we would encourage you to apply for a trial license, which you can through our website. So you just need to go onto the website, which was anybodytech.com, and go to the contacts page, and then over there you'll find some buttons over there that will let you request a trial license. So thank you all again, and have happy holidays, and we'll meet again next year.